Does your god approve the slaughter of women and children? Asks the Aztec of the Spaniard. Holy shit, you must be joking. But no joke at all. The savage is being serious. So, no. God does not approve of the slaughter of women and children. And whilst we are on the topic of deities, could you possibly be so kind as to explain to me what those red marks are on the stairs of your temple? Could you perhaps be so kind as to point out the significance of the towers of human skulls in your cities? And if it wouldn't be too much of a bother, could you please explain to me how your people make it rain? Everyone knew exactly what Batman Aztec was going to be the moment the title was announced. And it is precisely what you thought it was going to be. It is a Batman, and I say that with heavy quotation marks, movie that shows the Aztecs as just noble savages who didn't do nothing, who had a brilliant civilized empire easily the equal or superior, in fact, to that of those silly Spaniards. Meanwhile, the Spanish invaders are evil, killing people for no reason whatsoever, just for sheer shits and giggles. As completely unprovoked, they just come in to annihilate the brave and prosperous Aztec Empire. Instead of, being begged to do so by the countless tribes that the Aztecs tyrannized by constant slave raids and mass human sacrifices. And sure, you can definitely point towards a whole heaping heck of a lot of Spanish excesses against the local populace. Oh, they went to town on the Aztec Empire, no doubt about it, but it can all unironically be 1000% justified by simply saying sorry, but the human sacrifices will stop. But we shan't focus exclusively on that idiocy, as the question still remains, is Batman Aztec at least a good Batman movie? Well, initially, upon hearing about the premise, myself and pretty much everyone else knew, again, precisely what was going to happen. But the basic underlying idea is intriguing. Okay, Batman is a character that has been done to death. He's already had countless movies, TV shows, and animated features. So having Aztec Batman, something crazy that hasn't really been seen before, well, it at the very least sounds interesting. It at the very least will introduce us to a setting that we do not already know, and could open up a whole host of interesting interpretations of various characters. In theory, that is. In reality, none of that happens, as this movie right here is the perfect example of an established property, in this case DC's Batman, being simply taken over, subverted by somebody else in order to tell somebody else's story. As the entirety of Batman Aztec has virtually nothing whatsoever to do with Batman. The only real connection points between the character of Batman and Yohuali is that they wear bat-inspired costumes. That's quite literally it. Aztec Batman has no problems whatsoever killing people. In fact, his primary motivation throughout all of this is to kill Cortez. He eagerly embraces gunpowder weaponry, and at the start of the show, his mother has already passed away. At least he gets his dad killed in front of him as a adult, basically, but that's the closest connection beyond fashion sense that Aztec Batman has with actual Batman. There are some other Batman characters too, more or less just forced into their new roles. Poison Ivy is a goddess here, fighting alongside the Aztecs very openly and obviously so against the Spanish. Catwoman is a princess who steals from the poor to give to the rich, not what Catwoman was pretty much ever about. And Two-Face is Cortez, although he doesn't really do anything Two-Facey. He flips a coin for some reason. He doesn't really have much of a reason to do this. And he doesn't even go particularly insane. He's already been demonstrated to be the kind of individual who will do anything necessary to advance his agenda. So him becoming Two-Face, well, it is quite literally a skin-deep transformation. And the Joker, or Yorker with a Y, I mean, at least he's the closest you get to an actual bloodthirsty Aztec, but he didn't even really do anything wrong. He's one of the priests that influences Montezuma to allow the Spanish into Tenochtitlan. And from the perspective of a story where the Spanish are just evil and the Aztecs are just good, that, I guess, is the peak of villainy that he's committed there. After which he is driven out of Aztec society, and he comes back home to his family, whom he then sacrifices to the gods. Why? Well, because a literal god is tricking him, is influencing him, and is making him see things. Joker didn't stand a goddamn chance. It's literally not his fault. He is being tricked by a god. Oh, and after the god reveals himself and goes, "Haha, I tricked you, I've been screwing with you all this time," the Joker's reaction is, "Oh, okay then, I guess I'll double down." Which isn't so much evil as it's simply just retarded, honestly. All of this is to say that this is not a Batman movie in any way, shape, or form beyond the most superficial, esoterical layer. And even then, it's barely a Batman movie. This is obviously something that was somebody else's story in total, somebody else's characters in total, but then Warner Brothers came over and said, "Hey, would you like for us to pay for everything and give you a big boost to your marketing by allowing you to violate our intellectual property?" To which they said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So if you were wondering about whether or not you should watch this movie because you are desperately starved of any Batman-related entertainment, and who can blame you after Caped Crusader, or more aptly named The Marvelous Adventures of Barbara Gordon and Detective Montoya, who can blame you? This is not going to be satisfying your need for more Batman either. With that out of the way then, is the story itself any good as a standalone, non-DC, non-Batman entity? Not really. The problem is that this movie was clearly designed with very different characters in mind, with very different backstories and very different baggages. The sacrifices necessary to try to tie in the DC characters to some degree overloads the movie with too many characters, none of which really get a satisfying introduction. Poison Ivy is technically in the movie, but her role is simply to be Aztec goddess number green. Catwoman is technically in the movie, but her role is only to be a mild sort of love interest and the girl with the whip who saves Uohali's useless ass when he's finding his feet as the Batman. Joker is technically in this movie as well, but his actual influence upon the plot too is near non-existent and could easily have been replicated by any random background character. If the movie had focused exclusively on the revenge relationship between Uohali and Cortez, then at least you could have built up a nice repertoire between the two. But they don't. They skip virtually all of that as well, beyond a couple of minor scenes, just to remind you that they don't like one another. It is painfully obvious that this story was simply not meant to take place over an hour and a half, and is massively overstuffed with characters as it is. And at the end of it all, it even introduces the Penguin, because we weren't drowning in enough superfluous characters already. And this, yet again, simply communicates that this was never intended to be a Batman movie. This is somebody else's story about something else, and it would have been far more impactful as something else. You would still have had the same flaws, a bit of a bare bones plot, and an obvious Aztecs were actually pretty cool, chill guys, and their excesses were massively overstated by those evil Spaniards who, by the way, just killed hundreds of people for absolutely no reason. But at least it would have been unique then. At least it would have been different and interesting then. But now, all it is a really, really subpar Batman movie with very little Batman in it. And the worst part is, there was a possibility here for a rather interesting story. First and foremost, Batman should not be Aztec. Batman should never have been Aztec. What you do is, you start Batman out as a member of one of the countless other tribes being oppressed by the Aztecs, a la Apocalypto. You then follow Batman's quest for revenge against Joker, and you may very well heap upon him the sins of the Aztec people, excuse it by them being driven crazy by this mad shaman or whatever. Have their relationship established as one of constant rivalry. And then introduce the Spaniards as a tertiary faction, coming in between all of these power blocks and throwing everything into a loop. Are they enemies to Batman? Are they friends? Perhaps they could initially be friends, but then Batman understands that, oh no, these are just another conquering people. And so he needs to wage a guerrilla war against them, even as his own people turn on him, going, no, they can defeat the Aztecs. So what if they're behaving a little bit bad here and there? Compared to the Aztecs, they're saints. There is a lot of interesting morality you could potentially investigate there, as to the responsibility of a conqueror, as to the desperation of an already defeated people, a question of whether or not to submit to a evil to defeat a greater evil. And, of course, the justifications on both sides, both for Batman to continue to resist, knowing that it will cause yet further casualties on all sides, and the Spaniards, who come to enforce their own view of morality upon the savages, and obviously the greed element as well. And tragically, they focus nothing at all on the Spaniards' attempt to convert the populace, as that was a role the conquistadors viewed as almost as important as the gold. Not to mention, you could easily draw interesting parallels and comparisons between Christianity and the savage culture of the Aztecs. The Aztecs kill people. Human sacrifice bad. But what if you genuinely believe that without it, the world would end? They don't even try to mention that in all of this. It is, at the end of the day, exactly what we thought it would be. A wasted opportunity that fails to be an interesting piece of entertainment about the Aztecs or the conquistadors, and equally so fails to be an engaging piece of entertainment about Batman. All in all, therefore, I have no choice but to declare Batman Aztec an absolute and utter failure. Not even worth your time to watch because of how idiotic it is. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.